Have you ever stopped to think about how one single decision can change, well, everything? I want you to imagine a world where the D-Day landings just never happened, where the outcome of World War II was completely different. It's not science fiction. It's a very real possibility we're going to explore right now. So let's dive in.
So what if the United States had decided to sit this one out? It's a huge question, right? To get our heads around it, we're going to break it down into three big pieces. First, we'll look at what would have happened on the actual battlefields. Then, the global economy. And finally, the political world order, the very ideas we live by. Let's start with the war itself.
All right, first up, the most direct change, the war's new course. You see, America wasn't just another ally in the fight. It was, for all intents and purposes, an industrial giant that became a military superpower overnight. Taking that piece off the board, well, it doesn't just change the game. It creates a whole new one.
Let's get specific. Think about D-Day. That incredible world-changing invasion of Normandy was overwhelmingly American. We're talking about the ships, the planes, the supplies, and hundreds of thousands of troops. Without the United States, that invasion is simply impossible. Britain and the Soviet Union are left fighting a brutal two-front war on their own, and honestly, it's a war they probably would have lost. Hitler's grip on Europe could have become permanent.
And it's not just Europe. Far from it. Over on the other side of the globe, Imperial Japan was on the move. Without the U.S. Navy standing in its way, there would have been almost nothing to stop them. They would have swallowed up China, the Philippines, maybe even Australia, creating a massive empire that would have dominated the Pacific for who knows how long.
Okay, so the military side is pretty stark. But wars aren't just fought with guns and tanks, they're fought in factories and with money. And the economic consequences of America staying home, well, they would have been just as massive.
You know, here's a fascinating angle. For the United States itself, the war was actually an economic miracle. It was the massive government spending on war production that finally, definitively pulled America out of the Great Depression. It put millions of people back to work and built the industrial base for a new superpower. Without that spark, the U.S. likely would have stayed stuck in its economic rut for years, maybe even decades.
And the ripple effects of that are just staggering. Just picture a Europe left in absolute ruins, with no hope of rebuilding. The Marshall Plan, that incredible injection of American cash that rebuilt the continent, it never happens. So you're left with a shattered, impoverished Europe, a perfect breeding ground for radicalism and instability. It would have been a ghost of its former self.
And that leads us straight to the political fallout. See, World War II was never just about land. It was a clash of ideologies, a brutal worldwide fight between democracy on one side and totalitarianism on the other. And without America in democracy's corner, the 20th century could easily have become the authoritarian century.
Just take a look at this. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? In this alternate reality, the values so many of us take for granted, things like freedom of speech, democracy, basic human rights, they wouldn't be the norm. They'd be the exception, a flickering candle in a world dominated by regimes that want nothing more than to snuff it out.
And then, of course, there's the Soviet Union. The whole Cold War was defined by the standoff between two superpowers, the US and the USSR. Now, take the US out of that equation. What happens? Well, there's no one left to push back. You can bet that Soviet-backed communism would have spread like wildfire through the ruins of Europe and deep into Asia.
And finally, we have to talk about the most important part of all of this, because this isn't just an abstract thought experiment about maps and economies. It's about people, millions and millions of people. And the human cost of American inaction, it's almost too horrifying to contemplate.
This is the toughest part to talk about, the Holocaust. The systematic murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others. Without Allied forces, including America, to liberate the concentration camps, those camps might have kept operating for years. The killing would have continued. It is an absolutely unspeakable thought.
And it's impossible to know the exact number, but it's a grim certainty. Millions more would have died, not just in the death camps, but from starvation, from political purges, and from the endless grinding wars that would have continued to tear the world apart without a decisive end to the conflict. The death toll is already staggering. This would have made it so much worse.
So, when you put it all together, the picture is pretty clear, and it's not a pretty one. The world would be a darker, less free, and less prosperous place. There'd be no United Nations, no concept of universal human rights, just a planet dominated by brutal regimes,
constant conflict, and widespread poverty.
And maybe that's the biggest lesson here. Choosing not to do something, that's a choice too. Inaction is an action. It has consequences. And in this case, the consequences of standing on the sidelines would have shaped a world that is almost unrecognizable to us today.
So it all comes down to this. In that alternate world, that darker, less free world, born from a single decision to stay home, how different would your own life be? I mean, would you even exist? It's a huge question, and it's one worth thinking about.